Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm Tariq, Malik, editor-in-chief of Space.com, and we are here with an illustrious panel of industry leaders, of experts, of doctors, at least two, if not more, to help us learn about what's coming up after the International Space Station and how to preserve that legacy that it's set in stone for the last 20-plus years. You know, there's been a continuous human presence in orbit at the International Space Station since 2000. Of course, construction began in 1998, but it has an expiration date in 2030 when NASA and its partners have agreed to end that program. But orbital access doesn't end there, as our experts here are going to let us know about. And I guess Dr. Janet Kavandi, if you could introduce yourself. I'll ask everyone to introduce themselves briefly, and then we're going to get into what's coming up next. Thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. I started my career at the Boeing Company in Seattle, Washington, Boeing Aerospace, when there was such a thing. And I was selected into the Astronaut Corps in 1995. I was very fortunate enough to be able to fly on 3 space shuttle missions. I then ran the Human Spaceflight Office there as Director of Flight Crew Operations. Eventually transitioned and ran the NASA Glenn Research Center up in Cleveland. And a few years ago, about 4 years ago, left NASA after 25 years, and I'm now president at Sierra Space, where we're working, of course, on Dream Chaser, flying that next year, as well as another commercial space station. So I'll pass that on to you, Shawna.
Thank you so much. I forgot the cardinal rule of public speaking, which is never go after the astronaut. It's always a letdown after that. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Shawna Pandya. I'm a Canadian physician. I work in rural emergency medicine, and I'm here today on behalf of the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences. We create test beds for bioastronautics, citizen science astronautics, as well as informing research in human spaceflight in the space domain. And I run their space medicine group, so I'm here to represent the perspectives of the space and health and medical aspects.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. My name is Baki, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of the Exploration Company. We are a company based out of Munich and Bordeaux that builds space capsules for low Earth orbit, both free-flying and docking to stations, commercial and ISS, as well as lunar landers for surface and gateway. Pass it on to Max.
Great, thanks, Tanya. I'm Max Haot. I'm the CEO at VAST. We are a space station designer and future operator. Our key differentiator, one of our key differentiators is our long-term vision to build and make real artificial gravity space station based on the Starship form factor, so 7 meter by 100 meter long, and spinning to create artificial gravity up to 1G. That's obviously a very ambitious goal and very long-term. And our number one strategic goal is to be one of the winners of the NASA CLD Phase 2 program, which is the successor to the ISS. And so in doing that, we've designed a program called Haven 1, which we expect, assuming we meet our timeline, will be the world's first commercial space station. And Haven 1 is a Falcon 9 size, 3.8 meter expandable space station that will be in orbit for 3 years. The launch date with our SpaceX contract is August 2025, with obviously a launch window. And it will be met by a Dragon crew on the VAST-1 mission that we are also fully contracted with SpaceX for 3 months later. That will stay up to 30 days on the space station and then return safely home. And so the VAST-1 mission is really designed to not only build the capability of the company to design, build, operate a space station, and have a crew visit it safely, but it's also there to impress NASA in the selection process that having done it, and maybe be the only one by then to have done it, we will be the one of the right partner, as we hope there'll be probably 2 partners.
Well, thank you all. So that's space station providers, space transportation providers, and of course the folks that are going to be operating those stations, either in space or on the ground or wherever they are, to lay that groundwork. And Max, you kind of mentioned it earlier. NASA has this CLD program that's the Commercial Low Earth Orbit Destinations program, kind of the space station version of what we've seen with the crew access, with cargo access going forward. And you kind of hinted at my first question, which is, there is this looming deadline for the space station. It will, it will reach its end at the end of the decade, I guess be deorbited sometime after that. And is the industry really ready to fill that void? When we saw the space shuttle program end in 2011, we had a 9-year gap before we had NASA had its own independent access to space, and we saw similar gaps at the end of course, the Apollo program leading up into shuttle as well. But it seems like having a 2-decade-plus continuous presence in orbit, you want to be able to preserve that unbroken access for science, for research, for experience. So how ready do you feel your specific companies are, the industry overall is, to kind of meet that goal of having continuous presence, a continuous access in orbit right now? I guess, Janet, we can start with you. Sierra Space.
Yeah, so we are trying to get ready very quickly. As you know, and you may have seen in the news, we've been burst testing our inflatable habitat. Our inflatable habitat is called Life, and we've done multiple burst tests, and we are up to our full-scale final pressurized tests. We passed all of them very successfully. So we are absolutely testing hardware and planning to have that in orbit by about 2027, so that we'll have plenty of time to outfit it, check it out, and make sure it's ready to bring on our customers before the end of the ISS.
So you're blowing stuff up on the ground.
We are blowing stuff up on purpose.
And for folks who aren't familiar with Life as much, and that's an inflatable habitat, something that is a little different than the big metal cylinders we've seen people build.
If you've ever seen the Bigelow version of the inflatable that's attached to the ISS today, it is the same type of technology. Made the materials are made by ILC Dover, and very, very strong, very good at protecting with radiation as well as micrometeorite impact protection, and very strong. And we're even able to put windows in it and still pass and exceed our burst pressure requirements.
Great. And Max, you mentioned for VAST that you've got that date of August 2025 as a target for at least the initial VAST module there.
Haven 1.
And I'm curious how that will set the stage for your goal for Haven 1, for that VAST 1 mission that will follow to go there, and what that timeline looks like for VAST as well.
So if you take it back as to why the ISS is being retired and what NASA is trying to do, the CLD Phase 2 program, it's about doing more in orbit with less budget. Right now the ISS budget is about just under $5 billion. I think they hope, that's public information, to maybe halve that, and with that to maybe have two provider for redundancy. And not only that, one of the ways to enable that is to have commercial users, not just the government as the single user, participate. And as you noted, it's replicating the success of the commercial crew program, but for space station. So that's obviously the end goal. And with that, there are requirements such as two NASA astronauts permanently on orbit, which requires resupply cargo, for example, as Dana planned to provide. And also external payload, robotic arm, many things. Haven 1, our first mission, if we deliver on the timeline that we're confident we will, which is by the end of 2025, it could maybe slip early 2026. Right now, based on all the public information, if we do our plan, it will be the world's first commercial space station. We obviously have to prove that. It's not done. It doesn't yet meet the ISS replacement requirement. So it's designed to be done as quickly as we can. And the way we did that is we partnered with SpaceX, both for the crew flight and for obviously the launch. We use the launch vehicle that exists today, Falcon 9, that we can buy and know will launch when we're ready. And we also kept it very simple. It's a 3-year space station that is only 40 days of consumable for crew. So during the 3 years, we might have up to 4 expeditions of 10 days each. And at the end, we have to deorbit it safely in there. So it's all designed around speed and around proving that we can launch 4 humans, they can dock, they can enter the space station safely, stay hopefully up to 40 days and do that a few times, and most importantly, return safely. So that's our plan, may the best win, and we'll see what happens. The last point I wanted to make is one of our key differentiators. We're not waiting for NASA money. We're funded by a single private investor, and our budget to the end of 2026, so that includes delay, is fully funded. Our SpaceX contract is already fully active for Dragon and Falcon. We've already paid maybe 40% or something like that without breaking an NDA in that range. So that's what differentiates us, is that it's all about execution, and we'll see what happens. So.
And clearly, with a partner like SpaceX, you would have transportation then to your station. Janet, Sierra Space with Dream Chaser, then you have both the kind of like components there as well in terms of transit. And Dana, with the Nix capsule that the exploration company is building, you're looking at kind of filling that kind of transportation gap too, which was one of my questions, is do we have a gap there? Because having a space station gap is one thing. Having a gap in how to get to these commercial stations could be something else entirely.
So there is a gap. Right now, I mean, you have Cargo Dragon, which is a great product, but really that's the primary product, and we need to have more competition within cargo and more options for that. We're designing our capsules to ultimately be able to take crew as well, but starting with cargo with a focus on the different commercial space stations and ISS. But also to fill in the gap in between for a lot of different types of experiments that can't make it on to ISS. So we have a free-flying capsule as well that is filled with cargo from the space industry for IOD and IOV purposes, but also lots of different types of R&D across industries and in-orbit manufacturing as well. So I think there is a gap in terms of R&D that's possible outside of ISS. There's a gap in terms of competition and global competition. So for us, we're building our capsules to be launcher agnostic. So we will be launching with SpaceX, but we'll also be launching from India. We'll be launching from Ariane. We really want to be able to serve the global market and not just have a US option, which is a great option, but we need more options for the world.
Thanks. And Max mentioned August 2025. Janet, you mentioned 2027 for life, right? But you might have a Pathfinder that might be smaller. Is that correct?
Yeah, our initial, ultimately we're part of Orbital Reef with Blue Origin, but our initial Pathfinder is that version I was just talking about. So the early 27, if we're lucky, late 26, but probably 27.
And for Nix, Dana, what is the exploration company looking at in terms of a timeline to get that first flight up, or even a full operational flight with crew or automated flights?
Yeah, so we have a ballistic demonstrator going out in the coming couple of months. The first full cargo mission is going out in October 2024 with SpaceX. And then the full 4-ton Nix Earth capsule, so the one that would be taking cargo to station, that's in 2026.
Thank you. Now, we talked a lot about hardware gaps, the destination, transportation to get there, the last couple of questions. But Shawna, people will eventually be using these commercial space stations one way or another. Is there a gap in terms of training or just in having qualified scientists, professional astronauts to crew these types of vehicles?
I see we only have 16 minutes and 30 seconds left, so I'll try to keep my comments brief. Shortly, yes. So when we talk about what it means to keep humans not just surviving but thriving in space, the question isn't, is 3 commercial space stations too crowded? Because fast forward to the future we want to see, it's going to be an armada of commercial destinations in low Earth orbit, and there will be winners and losers, but eventually, humanity being as creative as it is, there will be many, many winners. And so when we talk about training, it's not just the traditional agency route of what it means to be an astronaut, which is extreme, extreme determination, extreme expertise, training, but it's also the nature of the work of what we're going to do in low Earth orbit is absolutely going to change. It's not just going to be a destination for pilots and engineers and scientists. It's going to be a destination for entrepreneurs and athletes and artists even. So, some amount of baseline training. What does it mean to navigate in microgravity? Don't make the rookie mistake of launching yourself out of your seat once you unstrap. That's a good way to hit a wall. So that, there's all these types of discussions. And then also with that, that there's these gaps in what does the workforce training look like? What does the academic curriculum look like? What does the professional development look like? What does the interdisciplinary collaboration look like? And what does the community building, all of that on Earth and building capacity to support the work in low Earth orbit look like?
Yeah. You mentioned like just the three types of like stations or destinations we're talking about here, like a free flying Nix, a Haven 1, a life habitat. But I was just kind of preparing for this. We've got Axiom Space Station, we've got Orbital Reef, which is a different version, like a that will have a life habitat in it. You've got nanoracks in their plan. There's like at least 3 or 4 others that are either in the development or being planned. That's a lot of places, and I'm curious if you're really confident that there is enough of an interest in a market to support both, not several stations. Now, I did see like one report from Axiom that there could be a $37 billion market between 2020 and 2030 alone for commercial space stations. But how confident are you that there will be a client base, a personnel base, a transportation base to serve all of the needs that you're going to be able to offer on these stations?
I mean, today it's primarily, as we all know, science and research that either support what's happening on Earth and fundamental physics and research, or even future exploration like moon exploration and Mars. Ultimately to really create, and that today all of that is funded by sovereign space agencies and government primarily. The low Earth orbit economy in terms of human spaceflight is very small. There are privately funded astronauts. We don't like to call them tourists, but there are a few, and they've participated to that economy.
You said explorers, I think, when we were talking about it. Let's call them explorers, right?
We much prefer the word explorer, or even privately funded astronaut. Not tourists. But the point is that that's still a small part of the market. So for us, long term, I think we hope that there is a killer app in space manufacturing. That will change all of that, right? That where you can literally have a profitable business making something in space and bringing it back, whether you're seeding crystals or medicine or whatever, but we're not there yet. So for us, we see this decade is sovereign nations that are interested in furthering science, and that's the primary market. And maybe we will have an open AI moment, like suddenly there is a viable in-space manufacturing model and system, and suddenly everybody's putting 20 stations that are space factories. So I hope that within this decade we will have that moment. And before that, no, maybe there is no funding from the market to do 20 of them. There's definitely enough need from the Western world to have 2, especially if we lower the cost. And as we know, we have the Chinese one and not the Russian one, but others potentially from other nations.
Sean?
Yeah, to Max's point. And so when we talk about the future we want to see, fast forwarding to 15 years from now, let's plan, let's shoot for the moon, pun intended, and let's aim for an economy that's bustling. Let's aim for an economy where return and travel to low Earth orbit and back is so mundane, so banal that we ignore the view outside the window to look what is coming in on our phones, right? That could be a vision of success, although I'm sure most of you are cringing at that. But in order to create this roadmap of what success looks like in the future, we also need to dial it back a bit and then start thinking about, well, how do we future-proof ourselves for that? Where are we right now? What are the risks if there are failures? Because then we have the risk of creating this bubble that can hold all of us back. So as much as there's this commercial competition, there's this built-in collaboration there where we all need to push each other forward so we can leapfrog ahead and create this vision of humans in space that is successful and thriving, and that includes disciplines and use cases that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's sort of a chicken and egg situation right now because we have a lot of, we had a roundtable earlier today where we were talking about all the excited folks who wanted to do manufacturing in space, who wanted to do research in space, and then we have investors who are like, well, I want to see the profit first before we invest. So it's like, well, you can't build the station without the investment, but so you can't prove it works until you have the platform. And so we know it's going to work, and we know that as soon as that killer app or that whatever that eureka is at some point we're going to see it, and then it's going to be, I think, the gold rush, right? Is where everyone can't wait to get up there to prove that they can make something as well. And so we're trying to do it logically, at the right pace, with the right support, knowing that this is going to happen, but not being able to prove it until we actually see the results.
And just to add to that, I think we're at such a pivotal time where we know, this community knows how important space is to the world, but yet the average person really still does not understand that. And I think it is our responsibility to educate a lot of these, the world on this. You have budding countries that are looking to get into space, which is amazing. We need to push that forward. We have so much education to be done at the industry level. We know it, they don't believe it. You have people saying, like, why are you investing in space? I have Google Maps, and things like that, where people really just view it as, this far out rocket science thing that's not them, and that's just so false. And so we have a lot of education to do, and it's our responsibility to do it.
Just to follow up on that quickly, because we've been talking about space stations very generally, and if you use the International Space Station as an example, that's like a one-stop shop. It's the size of a football field end to end. It's supposed to kind of handle everything under the sun. But Max, you mentioned in-space manufacturing. You've got life, for habitation. Do you see a market that will either test specific uses first, manufacturing, destination like an explorer type of thing, or a specific life science research, and then build out the case for a multi-purpose commercial station? Or do you want to start from that multi-purpose first and then drill down and find a niche where you have specialized astronauts to do one thing at one place over time, and then that's a destination as a market?
The ISS sole purpose is the payloads and the research and the science, but it takes a lot of maintenance. So if you look at the crew, when they were a crew of 3, there are 2 astronauts that are dedicated to maintaining the station, and only 1 that is doing science at 35 hours a week. So that's it. Now there are 4 astronauts, and they've doubled that to 2 times 35 hours. So ultimately, even the ISS, even though it has a beautiful cupola and all of that, it is a laboratory in space, and that's its sole purpose, is these hours of astronaut time dedicated to science and experiment, installing them, maintaining them, retrieving them, fixing them, and so on. And so I think any space station, whether it's small or something like Orbital Reef, that we've seen the renders with many modules. We're assuming there's an entertainment aspect, but it's also for supporting science and development.
I think we're trying to make it as flexible as possible so that whatever those killer apps happen to be, whether it's biological or 3D printing, manufacturing in space, that we can expand those areas along an orbital reef and add more modules. By the way, life can also be used as a laboratory and not just a habitat, but we can do biological research in there, have blood boxes in there, or we can do, make silicon wafers and things like that. So whatever the customer wants, we will devise the station to accommodate that. We can also talk about training. We'll be able to train our own, not our own researchers, but researchers from different companies who have done this their whole lives to be astronauts, so that they can do their own research on these platforms, which they can iterate much faster. They're experts in their fields. We can train them to live in space, and then hopefully they can make progress much faster than we've traditionally seen on the ISS today.
That's a really important point. In the shuttle program, they would send actual scientists to do the experiment on the station instead of waiting for the experiment to come back down. And this has stopped since the shuttle program. And so commercial space station can re-enable that. So not only flying the payload of the scientists and have remote instructions and remote monitoring, but flying the scientists with the experiment to quickly iterate is another aspect that we can open with commercial space stations.
I did want to build on, I think, the points that you both mentioned there, because those all rely on people, and those people need to learn either how to be safe and survive on a commercial station, or they need to be trained on how to maintain or repair if it's if you have a Sierra astronaut or a VAST astronaut or a NIX astronaut, right? And I'm curious how you see that training going. Like, will there be like a union that can go to any space station to do repairs, or will it be very specialized for it? And maybe Shawna, if you could kind of also weigh in on that training to expand the envelope of what an astronaut might be in the future for these stations themselves?
Absolutely. So in terms of what we do at IIS, we have all manner of test beds for testing and preparing students and researchers for different aspects of spaceflight. We have a neutral buoyancy lab, we have a parabolic flight, we have gravity offset. So these are all, ways of retiring risk before you go to this high-risk place. And so using these test beds to acclimatize scientists, researchers, manufacturers before they get there is a way of creating that pipeline that can be provider agnostic. We are happy to be a test bed for Sierra. We're happy to be a test bed for NIX, for VAST. And in fact, we're flying our first suborbital researcher with Virgin Galactic, Kelly Girardi, at a soon-to-be announced date. So, the future that we're trying to create for ourselves is coming very, very quickly. We are the architects of that. So it's up to us to be mindful and conscientious and say, what direction are we heading? Is this going how we want? And how do we work together to create this global infrastructure that will support all of humanity?
And Janet, Max, Dana, I mean, how do you see approaching maintenance for your stations over time? Because clearly the station needs maintenance. They had a leak this week, and they're going to work to address that in the near future with some spacewalks. How do you plan to address that and bake that into your plans?
So we anticipate, well, with respect to the training, we'll have a professional astronaut corps. I'm not sure if it'll be the first, but at least it will be a Sierra Space Astronaut Corps. We're planning to go out for a selection process to start after our Dream Chaser 100 lands for the first time next year. And those will be the people that do the maintenance on our space station. They'll be trained in a way similar to the way NASA trains astronauts today. They could do EVA, robotics, whatever we find that we are designing our space station to need, we will train those individuals. The second category will be those researchers, our guest astronauts who will be professionals who will go up and do their own research, and then we'll also have the training for the experiential. It's another term that we've chosen to use, to go up for the experience of it, who will receive less training and won't have to do that maintenance. So all those different categories are what we're planning.
I mean, the first approach to safety is the design. You have fault tolerance criteria, for example, for loss of life, and requirement like 2 fault tolerance for anything that could, create a loss of life event, or maybe lower for loss of mission, and so on. Our ultimate goal is to be NASA certified, which is the ISS and Dragon. Our first mission will not be NASA certified, but internally we are following many of the same standards and using a lot of the expertise of our team that have worked on other crew programs to make sure that we have a safe design. So design is one thing, operations, what procedures and what happens from the ground, remote control, when something goes wrong is another aspect. And obviously crew training and procedure. Most of our training will be handled by SpaceX. They have a comprehensive program for Dragon. And then we have an additional joint training module for docking, where it's both together, both systems. And then we also have an additional module for operating the station. We're building an astronaut advisor group that will also be working with our astronaut. Our first one is Gareth Reisman that now is helping our future customers with all that aspect. But safety is number one, and as you can imagine, a space station company having a safety event, it doesn't bode well for the future, and neither for the future of the full industry. So we're using this proven method, culminating into NASA certification for future products to get there.
Well, we've got like just over a minute, but I did want to ask Dana one more thing, because we've talked a lot about astronauts, but I know that one thing that the exploration company is looking at with NIX is both crewed operations, but also automated stations that then you could launch and then reuse over and over again with reusable crafts. How will that change, I guess, the market in terms of what a space station is and what it could do over time?
So we don't actually position ourselves as a space station. I think that's, we don't plan on launching and staying there. Yes, our missions can be longer. So our NIX Earth capsule can stay up in orbit 2 to 6 months, up to a year if need be from a client perspective. But ultimately it's meant to give experiment science enough time in microgravity to get what they need and then retrieve their payloads, however long it takes to get that so that they can get that data. For us, we've seen that there is a lot of interest once you have taken the time to educate, and that takes a lot of time. And so we've seen a lot of interest across very different industries. So some of it are the industries we know, like pharmaceuticals and semiconductors, but some of them are the ones that might not have thought of space, like anti-aging, things like that, where we're talking to fashion companies and people that are now starting to realize, after you kind of very patiently explain it to them over and over again, that there is something that can be done. It does not need to cost very much, and it can return in a period of time that is not too different from doing a long-term study on Earth. And so if you're able to talk non-space to non-space people, they're getting there.
Great. Well, thank you. I feel like we could keep going forever about this subject, but I will just wanted to close with, it does seem like there's a clear pathway to having commercial stations going up before the end of the International Space Station. But if you are looking for a test crew member, please note that Tariq J. Malik is available for private flights to the stations in time. But thank you all for joining us today to give us a glimpse of what's coming up ahead, what the opportunity is ahead, and thank you all for joining us as well for this talk.
Thank you.